Hey, this is Peter Rodiker from Yellow Room Recording in Portland, Oregon. I'm going to walk you through a mix for the song Straight White Male that I just did for an artist out of Portland, Maine named Chris Robley. I'm going to play a little bit of the rough mix that he sent me, then I'll play the full mix, then I'll give you a breakdown of how the session is set up, and then we'll go through track by track and see how we got there. So here is a bit of the rough mix that Chris sent me when he sent the tracks.
Put an angel up at the top of your Christmas tree, and it shines a little cheery light for all your kids and wife to see. But when the house falls asleep, you unplug that wire, leave it on too long, you know it'll start a fire. Straight white male, like the big fat head of the old snake who eats his tail. Though the only thing you understand's the only thing you understand. Oh, ain't that right, white American man?
So that was the rough mix. I'm going to go ahead and play the full final mix so you know what we're dealing with.
There's a street light out at the end of your cul-de-sac, where the crickets rub their legs in the woods out back, and the dark like death stretches on. You can't tell what's the woods and what's your lawn. Straight white male, did you straight white dad tell you, hey, kid, you dare not fail? Because a measure of a real man's in his hands. Oh, ain't that right, white American man? You put an angel up at the top of your Christmas tree, and it shines a little cheery light for all your kids and wife to see. But when the house falls asleep, you unplug that wire, leave it on too long, you know it'll start a fire. Straight white male, like the big fat head of
as straight white male. I'm going to break down the session now for you. You can see all the tracks here. These are all my individual tracks. There are some submixes, reverbs, delays, everything like that. As we get down to the bottom of the edit window here, you'll see all of these submixes. These are all drums, percussion, all vocals, all music, all effects, low end, high end. And I have these two different submixes that I go through. There's not a whole lot on these, but sometimes my 2-bus will have a lot more on it. And then those run into this mix bus. So here, we'll show this over here. So here are all these submixes. They all are fed by all these tracks over to the left. And then submixes here, and then the mix. So on the mix bus, all I have is just my metering, the isotope insight. Then for submix 2, over here I have ozone, where I have 2 limiters and a multiband compressor. So the maximizer.
Like the big fat head of the old snake who eats his tail.
Pull that off, it's going to get a lot quieter. Same thing with this vintage limiter over here. I'll put the maximizer back on, take the vintage limiter off. Then this multiband compressor, this is cleaning up the low end quite a bit.
Like the big fat head of the old snake who eats his tail.
If we pull it off,
Oh, the only thing you understand's the only thing you understand.
gets a little squishier. Put it back on.
Ain't that right, white American man? Straight white man. Oh, your eyes are
All right, then on submix 1, I've got the virtual bus compressor. Just getting about 1 dB of reduction here. This isn't doing anything other than adding some character.
like the big fat head of the old snake who eats his tail. Oh, the only thing you understand's the only thing you understand.
I'm bringing it back in.
Right, white American man.
Then the Slate virtual tape machine. Take it out.
Your eyes are tight as useless if the wind doesn't fill our sails. But you better pay the leaky boat and never lose sight of land.
I always feel like this adds some focus on the 2-bus. And then VMR, just running through this virtual mix bus, gives it a little console emulation. We'll jump to the top of the session. I'll go through and break down every individual track now. We'll start with the drums here. We're going to start with our kick, which is actually 3 different tracks. The first one is this that I have labeled an 808. It's not really an 808, but it functions sort of similarly. So a lot of that sub. This, we have this 80s kick. On this one, I used a little bit of this transient designer to take some of the attack off. It's just a little more forceful on the front than I wanted it to be. Here's without it. With. Just taking a little bit of the smack off the top. Then this kick room, not a whole lot of this going in here. And then all 3 of those together. Only thing going on here, little EQ cut off below 30, and then a little bump at 120 just to fill it out a little. So without. Back in. So this next thing, this is a dub set. A little EQ and VMR on here, taking some of the top off with the Pro Q, then cutting out a little of this around 5K. All right, then a lot going on here with VMR. Running through, getting some saturation here, then adding some more big, and also some presence, a little top end, a little more bottom on here, more compression here, a bit of 4K bump, a bit at 60 for a little of the sub, and then this was just to bring down the level that had been brought up quite a bit from adding all of this stuff in. So I'm just going to let this play a little bit. I'll pull in every element and take it out. And then everything out. All right, this kick thwack set, which kind of works together with this dub set. So Pro Q, just pulling out a little 5K again. That's with the 5K back in. VMR, a little less complicated. Virtual channel console emulation. Nothing drastic. A bit of this Neve EQ, adding some top end, a little more low. And then this FG401. Looks like you're knocking about 4 or 5 dB off. The slow attack, pretty fast release. Killing all of that. All right, just giving it some more life. All right, these two sort of work together. Got these submixed together. This click and kick. It almost functions like a hi-hat a lot of the time, but with some low end on it. The only thing I've got going on here is some EQ, pulling a lot of the top off with some crazy looking EQ curves, and then pulling out everything under 60. If I kill that, bring it back. Just sort of focusing it in the middle. Jump over to this hi-hat. Doesn't look like I did anything to it. It just comes in the second verse, and then I did a little editing on it apparently. And that's just running to this drum plate. Okay, over to the snare. There are 2 snare tracks. He sent them to me as one track, but I split them up so I could treat them differently. The first one is more of the meaty one. I just took a bunch of the top off. If I take that EQ off, so I didn't want quite so much of that top end, so taking that off. Okay, for this rim shot. Here it is with the reverb. So I'm going to pull the reverb off, and then I will kill all of these things, and then bring them in one by one. Yeah, pretty different than where we ended up. VTM, hitting it pretty hard, getting quite a bit of saturation. Fab filter EQ, pretty dramatic EQ curve. Taking a lot of that top end off. And then the decapitator, add some distortion and saturation. And we got that high cut on, taking a lot of the top off. And adding the plate back in. All right, then I didn't have anything else going on the submix for the snare. That snare plate, I'll let you hear both of those. So that's from Slate, and then I also have this reverb on after it. Taking off some of the bottom end, pulling a little of these low mids out. Then got a boost up here about 7,500, which is pretty rare. I usually don't end up adding anything to the top of reverbs, but apparently I wanted that. All right, so on this tom fill, that's PHIL, because this is our Miami Vice Phil Collins big dramatic drum fill moment. Here it is on its own. Then dry. And no plugins. Bring the VTM in. Then I'm going to bring the VMR up and bring all of these things in individually. SSL. Revival. API. Compression. And isotope trash. Getting it fuzzier and warmer, and then we'll add the drum plate in. And the hall. Grab a selection here where we can show the full drum bus. So I'm going to bring in all the sends. and solo the drums. And then I'll kill these two and then bring them in. And the compression. Next, we'll jump over to shh. So we wanted something that functioned like a crash cymbal at the start of these choruses, but I didn't actually want to use a crash cymbal. There's a lot of electronic elements in here, and just a regular crash cymbal seemed out of place. So my thought on this was I just wanted that high frequency energy, and the lyrics to this are extremely paternal, and it seemed like such a patriarchally dismissive act to shush someone. So I did 4 tracks of me saying shh. So this is what we had to start. Shh. That's just 4 passes of me saying shh. Then I reversed them. EQ. Taking out some top end. Compressor to control it a little. Doubler. It's about to start getting interesting. A delay, where it starts getting kind of crazy. Then it's going to this phaser where it starts to get especially crazy. Reminds me of Predator. So then that's going to go into this hall. And then also into this drum plate from Slate up here. Got a digital plate, and then reverb after it, cutting off some of the bottom, and a bit at 1.2K, which is a common refrain. The bass is one of the few organic instruments in here. I already pulled the effects off of it. Here it is dry. And bring the EQ in. Doing very little, just a little boost at 113. An alloy is doing quite a bit. We've got some pretty dramatic EQ curves. Then 2 levels of compression. I'll take both of them off and bring them in. And then a little more of this 1176 compression. Which rounds everything out a bit. And going along at the same time as that is this organ bass. So all that's on there is this EQ. I'll take that off. Bring it back. Not a drastic difference on those. I'm just clearing out some space for some of the other elements. There are these orchestral bells that go through this. We've got them up a little higher earlier in the mix, and then they kind of come down and fade into the background. All that's on there is this EQ. Take it off. Bring it back. Then we move on to the pads. The first one is this warm pad, which it looks like I did nothing to. Then this shrill pad. And here's those two together. Then this, what is this called? Harp and flute noise. This one's very cool. These are pretty important on these choruses, especially the first chorus. And then this is the counterpart to that. And then bringing in reverbs. And bringing the pads back in. And then those are just submixed to this pad level track. Doesn't look like I did much of anything to those. This Nintendo track here is super cool. So it does several things throughout this tune. So this is during one of the verses. Then later headed into the outro. And then this is the very end of the song. This treble noise. So on this first one, I've got alloy going. Quite a bit going on. EQ, exciter with a little bit of drive, a couple compressors, and a limiter. Just bringing it all together some. So I'll pull those out individually and bring them all back. So EQ. Exciter. Dynamics. Another compressor. doesn't look to be doing anything other than just bringing the volume up a little bit. Nintendo 2, go down to here. Looks like I probably have about the same thing going with just some slight variations. So we'll take all this stuff off and bring it back. It's the EQ. Exciter. Looks like a little more drive on this one. Compressor. The other compressor. And the limiter. Which same doesn't look like it's doing actual limiting. And then we'll bring the Hall in. And then there's this additional reverb at the end that I use to just space it way out. This also has VTM on here. Which I'll take that off for right now. And VMR that both of them are running through. So when I add VTM back in here, it's running it pretty hot. And then VMR, take the individual ones off and bring them back in. So here on this knee VQ, just adding some down here around 160. And then some more compression on here to give it some bounce. Slow attack, fast release. And we'll move on to the tribal elements. Okay, we're jumping over to this tribal flute. So there's two of these, got them panned left and right. Here's both of them together. These show up at the intro and the end of the tune. So individually, they sound like this. Just a little bit of EQ taking off some of the highs. With it out. And back in. And then the other one. And took some of the lows off of there. Took some of the highs off. So no EQ. And with it back in. Then we've got a couple arpeggios. Those are just going straight up the center. So those components are this, which I've got VMR on. And pull all this stuff off and back on. So it looks like just the distressor and the virtual channel console. And then the other one. Together. Add the effects back in. All right, then we've got this end verb, which is the little plate from Sound Toys. And then ahead of that is this Echo Boy to set it back even further. So the two things going through that, Nintendo and this other arpeggio, they start toward the center, they pan out to the right. Below that is this synth level here. The only thing on there is just the VTM with the same settings as most of these others. And this tribal submix is running through here. So we'll jump to guitars now. There are a few of them. Let's see if we grabbed everything. First up is this Queen guitar. It's a very Brian May tone. With no EQ. I just took some of the bottom off and give it a little more presence. Then we'll add the hall in. Not too much on that. This is Johnny Marr guitar. That's pretty cool. Same on this, little presence, took off some of the bottom. No EQ. With EQ. And with reverb. All right, then we've got these 4 epic guitars. And these are all submixed down to here. And then running into this guitar level along with the other guitars. There are no effects on here at all. And these guitar parts double this vocal part down here as well, which we'll jump into in a second. So this hall that some of the instruments are running into is this one from Slate, and then most likely taken off the bottom. Yep. So down to just these vocals by themselves. All together. With everything off. So these came to me with some effects on, so I didn't do anything to them individually, but we'll bring in all of these things piece by piece. So with nothing. VCC. Knee VQ. Compressor. Real ADT. And saturation level. Then with the hall. And the hall here is mislabeled, actually. That's a church from Deverb. I'm going to skip down to the lead vocal because the harmony vocals are going to make a lot more sense in that case.
straight white male, straight.
So 3 of these individually have VMR on them. They all have about the same thing, just the VCC, some slate EQ, probably pulling out some of the low end, getting a little more presence, and then tightening it up with this compressor. I'll just do one of them. They're all about the same.
Straight white male, straight.
So with nothing on this one,
Straight white male,
VCC.
straight white male,
EQ,
straight white male,
and compressor.
straight white male.
Then all 3, or 4 of these rather, are running through this submix down here. And it does have more stuff on it. So with everything on, it's this.
Straight white male,
Taking everything off.
straight white male,
BTM.
straight white male, straight white male,
DMR.
straight white male,
And de-esser.
straight white male, straight white male.
Now bring the plate in.
Straight white male, straight white male.
We'll jump down to these 2 choruses and this widener that I use to give the vocals a little more space. With them on,
Straight white male,
all of them off.
straight white male.
So this first one, I've got a de-esser in front of it. I tend to do that. I don't like too much top end from the chorus. And then that's going into nectar chorus. So we'll add that in. I'll play it once without and then bring it in.
Straight white male,
In.
straight white male,
Then the second one is this mondo mod.
straight white male,
In.
straight white male,
Then we've got this widener. There's a mod delay. There's a de-esser in front of it, EQ after it, that is doing nothing.
straight white male, straight white male,
And with the plate back in,
straight white male.
now we'll go on up to the background vocals.
Straight white male.
So clearly all kinds of effects on this. Most of that is how they came to me. If I kill all of that stuff,
Straight white male.
and you'll hear at the beginning how it sounds a little strange with the timing. Because these are background vocals, I matched the S's and the T's to the lead vocal, and it sounds funky by itself, but when you put it into the mix, you won't hear the difference. It just cleans it up. So I'll go through individually. This first one.
Straight white male.
Add the compressor.
Straight white male.
Yeah, some crazy auto-tune stuff on there. Second one is this EQ.
Straight white male. Straight white male.
And there's some weird pitch stuff going on in here. In the mix, I really like how they all interact with each other. Throwing VMR on.
Straight white male. Straight white male.
The way those come in individually. This is just VCC.
Straight white male. Straight white male.
Compressor.
Straight white male.
And revival.
Straight white male.
Jump down to the third one. It's just with this compressor.
Straight white male. Straight white male.
So all three of them.
Straight white male.
Adding the hall in.
Straight white male. Straight white male. Straight white male.
Obviously a super huge reverb with a bunch of modulation on it. Then we'll go up to just this high vocal. This only comes in, I think, just this one time. Yep. Looks like I also lined up the S's and the T's on here.
Straight white
All kinds of distortion and modulation on that. That's cool. So killing the EQ that I add on here.
Straight white
Obviously this is pretty dark and MIDI. So I took some of that out and boosted some of the presence a little.
Straight white
And then with the plate.
Straight white Straight white
One thing I didn't address is that I did do some vocal tuning on here, but I'm going to cover that in a separate video. But with that, this is the end of the mix walkthrough for Straight White Male. Thanks to Chris Robley for letting me use this tune. I'm Peter Rodecker from Yellow Room Recording in Portland, Oregon. If you're interested in having me mix anything for you or any of my other services, recording, production, guitar, mandolin, ukulele, or tin whistle tracks, you can reach me through the website. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. Cheers.